Hello, Bio 130 students, wherever you are at. Today we are going to get into the integumentary system, where the integument is literally the skin, and it protects all it protects everything that's on the inside of our bodies. The integumentary system, well, essentially, it's the skin, and then what are called appendages. Not in the sense of arms and legs, but when we're talking about the integumentary system, we have our skin, and then we have the appendages of the skin, which are the nails, hair, and sweat glands within our skin. So basically, integumentary system, two parts: skin, and then what are called appendages: nails, hair, sweat glands. Let's get into those. Skin, largest organ of the body. It is essentially, no joke, more or less 16% of the average person's body weight. Just 16% of what you weigh is pretty much your skin. And 6% of body weight, or my bad, 16% of your body weight is just your integumentary system. So your skin, your nails, your hair, the glands inside the skin. And then 6% of your body weight, that's just the skin itself. So hair, nails, the glands within your skin, that adds a whole host of other percentage points. Now, basic functions of the skin are: your skin, it provides a nice layer where liquids and viruses, pathogens, bacteria cannot get into. Excuse me. Pardon. It provides impermeability. So basically, you're not going to absorb water too effectively. You're not going to take in viruses, pathogens, bacteria, disease-causing agents too easily. Your skin acts as a nice layer protecting you from all those, from excess liquid and other stuff. It provides immunological function because there are antibodies, lysozymes, things that will digest pathogens, and immune cells, which are carried within the layers of the skin. Not all the way on the outside, outermost layer, but inside the internal layers of the skin, those things are being carried, which help defend if, say, you get a cut and things do try to seep in and break into your system. It helps, the integumentary system helps you to perceive the environment, whether to perceive things like texture, hardness, sharpness, firmness, softness, help you to perceive, say, warmth, heat, and cold. It helps your senses, helps your sense of touch, and it helps you to respond to the system, like thermoregulation. If your internal body is being, like, when I mean respond to the environment, respond to, say, the environment in terms of you compared to what's outside. For example, say it's very hot out and that is starting to raise your internal body temperature, you might do some evaporative cooling. You might activate your sweat glands to help carry heat in that sweat that will evaporate off, pulling that heat off of you. And say if another situation is conductive cooling, is where essentially your blood vessels, which carry your blood, which going through the internal parts of your body, they'll pick up heat. Your bloodstream will pick up heat because it's circulating through the internal parts of your body, not just the outside. Conductive cooling is essentially where your body, your integumentary system, allows blood vessels to come to the surface, toward the surface of your skin, so that heat can easily transfer from your bloodstream to the cooler outside surface, allowing you to release heat in that manner as well. And if you need to keep heat in your body, like through hypothermia, well then the bloodstream will just get pulled inwards. There are actually 7 layers of skin. There are 3 primary layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. The epidermis can be broken down into 5 separate individual layers, and then the next major partition of skin would be the dermis, which can be broken down into 2 layers, and then the last major layer is the subcutaneous fat, or the hypodermis, which is just a layer of fat. All of these provide different functions. For the epidermal layers of skin, which are innervated, let's see. Going from the layers of skin that are the most external, the most outside, the ones that are actually interacting with air, per se. The most external layer of skin, the one in contact with atmosphere, is the stratum corneum. And effectively, these consist of dead keratinocytes, which will randomly and continuously fall off. Keratinocytes, think of them as skin cells, which will randomly fall off as lower layers, more internal layers of your epidermal skin start pushing out toward the surface. The next layer in would be the stratum lucidum. This layer of skin is very clear, which is why it has the term lucidum in it, and these are essentially consists of zombie keratinocytes. They're not quite dead, not quite alive. That's how to put it. No granules or organelles in these cells, and they're on their way dead. They're on their way to die. Then the next layer inward, the 3rd layer, the middle layer of the epidermal skin, is the stratum granulosum. Cells that have many keratohyalin granules. And essentially, these make keratin handling proteins, and these release lamellar bodies, which are watertight lipid layer components. Not too important what they actually do for this class, just if you ever do go into a higher anatomy class, the stratum granulosum is essentially the first layer that actually has living cells that provide a function. Next layer in is the stratum spinosum, which consists of cells that are very spiny. The desmosome and the Langerhans cells. These cells are pretty dehydrated. They've lost a lot of water volume, which is why they are spiny. This is also where you will have immune cells traveling in the epidermal layers, in case any pathogen makes it through the stratum, strati, corneum, lucidum, and granulosum. Then the final layer, the most internal layer toward the inside of the epidermal layer, the most internal layer, is the stratum basale. And this is where there are a lot of keratinocytes and melanocytes that are alive, which essentially these are the things that help display what particular coloration of skin you have. And it is also an area of rapid cell division to help replenish that particular skin layer, because eventually the stratum basale will the older form of it, those older cells will get pushed and become the stratum spinosum, which pushes the current spinosum into the granulosum, which gets pushed into the lucidum. Eventually, this is where the stratum basale is where new skin cells are being produced, which eventually make their way to the surface, the stratum corneum, where they are already dead. That previous slide was the epidermis. Now, epi meaning above. The dermis, the dermal layer of skin, consists of two layers, which one of them is the papillary dermis, which consists of thin and loose connective tissue. It allows for easy movement of structures in the dermis, like easy movement of capillary blood vessels or even nerve endings if you have pain, or even nerve endings. Essentially, if your skin has any sensation of touch perception or pain, that's the papillary dermis reacting now. Essentially, the papillary dermis having a lot of give and take. This is where, if you need to do conductive cooling, this is where the capillary blood vessels, they can raise up toward the epidermis or come more internal inside the dermis, depending on whether you need to give off heat or keep in heat. Now, the next layer of the dermis is the reticular dermis, which consists of thicker, denser connective tissue. Essentially, this anchors structures in the integumentary system. It hunkers them down and anchors them. The reticular dermis is where you're going to see sweat glands, exocrine glands, like things like that. And also, this is where hair follicles exist. The reticular dermis being more denser, having a more dense type of connective tissue, it helps keep those hair follicles in place so that you can reliably grow hair in the same spot, if you're lucky. Next main layer of skin is the hypodermis. Hypo, which means below the dermis. And it's really not it's not skin in what you would normally think of, like not made of skin cells and not made of connective tissue, which would be the epidermis and the dermis respectively. The hypodermis is actually just made of subcutaneous fat. It's just a layer of fat. And where the epidermis provides protection from things outside the body that you don't want inside, like pathogens or excess water flooding in. And the dermis essentially provides support and structure and flexibility to the integumentary system. It helps anchor down the glands that are present. It helps provide an area for blood to flow. The hypodermis, with it being just fat, it provides shock absorption. So if you fall, this helps cushion part of the blow so that you don't damage what is more internal inside the body, like say muscle or organs or even skeleton, like the skull. We can get into different types of burns, like first degree, second degree, third degree. These essentially determine how much damage the integumentary system has received, whether if it's just the epidermis or if it's made its way into damage has made its way all the way to the dermis or even to the hypodermis. And well, let's think of it as this way. First degree burns are essentially just reddening of the epidermis. It hurts, sure, but it's going to be skin. The epidermis is designed to get damaged and quickly be replaced. So first degree burns, usually these could be replaced because fresh skin cells are being made in the stratum basale, which essentially pushes all the damaged epidermal skin layers up, out, and eventually shed off. Now, with a first degree burn, you might damage a lot of epidermal area in one go, which is why you'll usually see patches of skin coming off instead of what normally happens, which is some skin cells come off here, some skin comes off here, some on the legs, some on the face, some on the hands, all continuously, so you don't really notice it. First degree bones, you will notice because maybe a patch of skin will eventually peel off. Now, here's the thing though. The first degree burns, the epidermis, with it being innervated, there are no nerves. Therefore, it will hurt because essentially your dermis is sensing it. Now, the second degree burn, this damages the dermis itself, which can actually damage the area of skin where there are actually nerves present. And if those nerves get damaged, well, you might not notice the pain because you might not notice the severe skin damage because it destroyed your ability to sense damage. So effectively, secondary degree burns, that has made its way all the way to the dermal layers. And then, gosh forbid, third degree burns, this is where the damage is so bad, it's destroyed both the epidermis and the dermis, as well as now made its way to the hypodermis, and essentially damaging the fat presence in your skin. Now, these particular burns are much more darker because you've essentially burnt through the dermis. And these are the least painful type of burn because because the damage has already damaged your ability to sense things in your dermal layers, and the damage is so bad it's made it to the fat layer, which you don't feel damage when it's in the fat. But even though it's the least painful, it's the most severe and the most harder to heal from. Very costly. Eat lots of food to help give you the nutrients to heal from something like that, and seek medical attention. Absolutely. Now, that was all the skin. Getting into the appendages of the integumentary system, well, nails are essentially thick layers of keratin. Effectively, they're an extension of the epidermis, just harder. They have a lot of keratin in them. And nails typically grow 4 times faster. The nails on your hands typically grow 4 times faster than the nails on your toes, oddly enough. And as far as hair, growing from the follicles in the dermis, so nails are an extension of the epidermis, hair grows from the dermis, and typically it can vary, but usually you gain half an inch, more or less a centimeter of hair per month. And also present are the erector pili muscle, or the papillary muscle. These are in the papillary layer of the dermis. Essentially, these are what constrict and cause goosebumps, which causes bumps that are visible on through the outside of your skin, or the sensation of causing hair to stand on end because those pili muscles are pulling on the hair follicles themselves, thus pulling on the hair. Oddly enough, it's really the ability to cause our hair to stand on end is actually more or less useless in humans. Some species, like some certain apes, monkeys, I forget which one, hair standing on end kind of signifies to another of the species that, hey, I'm ready to go for sexual activity, things like that, or to receive sexual activity. In humans, we've kind of gotten past the need to use our hair to say when we're ready to have sexual activity. And glands that are present in the dermis. Well, holocrine glands, apocrine gland, and merocrine gland. The holocrine glands, essentially, these release secretions by breaking down actual cells. Like, there are cells in those holocrine glands, and they literally break apart that releases secretions. And what is released is sebum. Now, apocrine glands, these are top of the cell. Basically, inside apocrine glands, the very top of a cell, the apex of a cell, breaks off. And in doing so, it releases proteins, lipids, fats, steroid hormones. Merocrine glands, merocrine, these release water sweats by exocytosis, essentially the budding off of cell membranes. So cells in merocrine glands, they bud off and produce smaller buds of their cellular membrane, which contains water and sweat that will eventually pull its way to the surface and ideally quickly evaporate off the skin, allowing for the release of heat. Now, holocrine glands, their location is more in the face, chest, and back areas, and they help lubricate skin, which slows bacterial growth. And effectively slows down the growth of bacteria to the point where your skin naturally dying and peeling off helps prevent any bacteria that was growing there from staying on your body long enough to become a huge problem. For the apocrine glands, these are mainly in the armpits, groins, and nipples. This is where the release of contents, they release their contents into hair. And essentially, this is not the normal kind of sweating, but emotional sweating. More active during extreme emotions, like a lot of stress or a lot of butterfly in the stomach type feelings. That's the kind of sweating that happens during high emotions, and that's due to apocrine glands. Merocrine, these are concentrated in the palms, hands, soles of the feet. These help cool down our bodies through evaporative cooling, and also helps eliminate waste. Some small waste like skin that we want to get rid of, or hormones that we need to release quickly. Sweat is released. When sweat is released, it can pick up essentially antibodies and lysozymes. Lysozymes, they help break down anything that's at the surface of the skin, like pathogens, and antibodies to help us fight infections. Now, the skin also has some important functions, and we'll get into just one of those, which is vitamin D synthesis. This is actually our body using sunlight to help make stuff that our body needs. Essentially, 7-dehydrocholesterol is present in the stratum basale, the most internal, lowest layer of the epidermal skin layers, as well as in the next layer up, which is the stratum spinosum. So 7-dehydrocholesterol is present in those two layers of epidermis. Now, as UV light from the sun penetrates the top layers of skin and makes its way to the stratum spinosum and basale, that UV light modifies dehydrocholesterol into an active form of vitamin D. So 7-dehydrocholesterol, it's an inactive form of vitamin D. We can't really use it, but once it gets hit with UV light, it becomes a form of vitamin D that our bodies can actually use. And then that is eventually converted to calcitrol, which vitamin D gets carried into the kidneys, which then gets converted into calcitrol, which is the true active form of vitamin D, which we can use to help stimulate the absorption of calcium in the colon. And that was one particularly long video on the integumentary system. The next one we'll get into will be the diseases of the integumentary system. So at the 25-minute mark, that is the integumentary system of the body.